We've been sold a fantasy about the end of the world. In games, movies, and shows like The Last of Us, the apocalypse feels almost survivable, glamorized even. You're the chosen one, the hero with the tragic backstory and an unlimited access to shotgun shells. Nature reclaims the cities, people form tight-knit survival groups, and despite everything collapsing, there's still beauty, purpose, and hope. But real life does not work like that. We saw what COVID-19 did to us 5 years ago, which still feels very recent, and that was a very tame, light pandemic by comparison. People couldn't even handle wearing a mask. We locked down, hoarded toilet paper, and lost our minds over dalgona coffee and TikTok dances. I actually think we wouldn't have gone through this mess if it weren't for Gal Gadot singing Imagine from her mansion to remind us how hard it was for her to stay home for a week. That's how close we were to losing our over pretending to work from home and making sourdough starters. And that was just a flu-like virus. Now, imagine something worse. Something man-made. Something that gets brought up during every Trump tantrum and every Putin power trip. Something that, with the push of a button, guarantees there will be absolutely no winners. A nuclear war. If the bombs dropped tomorrow, there would be no grand narrative, no heroes, no second chance. Just panic, radiation burns, starvation and silence. No power, no medicine, and no Wi-Fi. Just a slow descent into something darker than fiction ever dares to show. And that's what Threads is. A daring film that strips away every comforting lie we've told ourselves about disaster. A movie that's so honest, so brutal, it's almost unwatchable. And if you ever sat through it, it will haunt you for weeks. And that's exactly why it matters. In the early 1980s, the world stood on the edge of something unthinkable. Ronald Reagan, former president of the United States, publicly floated the idea of shifting away from the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, the uncomfortable but stabilizing belief that no one would launch a nuclear strike because it would mean total annihilation on both sides. Instead, he entertained the possibility of a winnable nuclear war, suggesting that with the right targeting strategy, the West might somehow come out on top. And if it happened in Europe, even better, it wouldn't be on American soil. By that point, détente was dead. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 had shattered any illusion of calm. The Cold War was no longer cold. It was heating up very fast. Interestingly, in 1983, President Ronald Reagan watched an early screening of The Day After, the American TV movie that depicted the aftermath of a nuclear exchange between the US and the Soviet Union. According to his own diary, the film shook him. Its bleak portrayal of nuclear war, even filtered through an American lens, left a lasting impression. It became one of several turning points that pushed Reagan to reconsider his stance on nuclear weapons, eventually leading to more serious arms reduction talks with the Soviets. Tensions between the US and the USSR are high, and the idea of a nuclear war stopped feeling like some distant hypothetical nightmare. It started feeling imminent. At the BBC, a filmmaker named Mick Jackson felt the weight of that moment. He started with a documentary for the science series QED called A Guide to Armageddon. It was straightforward, cold, factual, just a simple question. What would actually happen if a nuclear bomb hit the UK? And while that program did leave viewers unsettled, it was not impactful enough according to Mick Jackson. Later that same year, Jackson was given the green light to push the idea even further. And what came out of that project was Threads, a film that wouldn't just show the science of nuclear war, but the human cost, unfiltered and devastatingly real. So real, in fact, that the BBC literally pulled it off the air because it succeeded well. Too well, because the night the movie was first broadcasted on September 23, 1984, it was dubbed as the night the country didn't sleep. The way I see it is Threads is separated in 3 acts: the ignorance, the apocalypse, and the aftermath. In the beginning of the movie, we meet a very ordinary couple in a very ordinary city, Ruth and Jimmy, living in Sheffield, England. We soon learned that Ruth is pregnant and the couple decides to get married, much to the disapproval of both their families. It's the perfect way to open the film because it nails the theme of the mundane, real people leading unremarkable lives. While everyone's busy working, going to the pub, or planning a wedding after an unplanned pregnancy, there are quiet signs in the background. Radio broadcasts, TV reports hinting at growing tensions between the US and the USSR over Iran. And like in real life, those news stories are mostly ignored, especially by the average citizens of a small city. But the situation escalates. The news becomes harder to ignore. Reports now dominate airwaves, and the anxiety grows. And yet, there's still a stubborn disbelief, a collective assumption that something this big could never happen here, not in Sheffield. Days pass, and the media starts broadcasting instructions: build a makeshift fallout shelter, stock up on food and water, and stay indoors where it's quote-unquote safe. The threat feels real now, and worse, no one seems prepared, not even the government. Civil servants with zero training are called to duty in a cramped underground bunker beneath City Hall, somehow convinced they can manage the crisis for a few days before things return to normal. For me, the moment it all felt real was when museum workers silently packed away paintings, hoping to preserve a fragment of their culture, of who they are. It's subtle, easy to overlook, but chilling. The quiet act of preservation plays out while protests echo in the distance, the silence inside and the chaos outside. The first act is brilliant because it mirrors exactly how we probably react today. We're flooded with bad news every single day. We scroll past it and we tune it out. We can't really blame the people of Sheffield for ignoring the warnings. They did what most of us would do. Ignorance is bliss. According to the director, Mick Jackson, the film was shot on a budget of £250,000 over 17 days. It's not much, but some of the effects used are so good for what they had to work with. The movie managed to portray the panic that would ensue after the sirens are blown so perfectly. People running around with no direction. Some of them are frozen in place, others are trying to get to safety. The use of fast cuts throughout showcased the frenzy, the destruction, and the helplessness. Text on the screen narrates what's happening during the impact from start to finish and adds a sense of realism, as if what we're watching is more of a documentary rather than a fiction. Government officials try to gather as much intel about the destruction as possible, but they quickly realize that this is out of their control. The proportion of the destruction is far greater than what they had anticipated. Very quickly, what was known as a peaceful and boring city turns into an apocalyptic scene. A city reduced to rubble. Lots of fire engulfs the rest of the buildings and living things. It's hard to conceive how Mick Jackson managed to capture the terror of a nuclear attack at that time. In order to make his movie, he has interviewed and consulted with many scientists, doctors, and defense specialists in order to make a depiction of a nuclear attack as real as possible, because according to him, the public needed to know the truth. I have seen quite a lot of post-apocalyptic movies. None of them pack half the punch that Threads does, even with a bigger budget. The bombing sequence, in my opinion, is the best portrayal of a nuclear devastation in filmmaking history. There are many disturbing images and moments in it. The haunting scene of a woman, overwhelmed by terror, urinates on herself as she keeps staring at the mushroom cloud. These depictions underscore the film's commitment to portraying the visceral human reactions to such an unimaginable catastrophe. To make things even more real, the movie doesn't even bother updating you about characters we followed from the beginning, like Jimmy, who was caught in the initial destruction. He just ceases to exist, and we never hear from him again, just like that. What sets Threads out from the competition is how the movie manages to tackle the theory of a nuclear winter. Weeks after the initial attack, we follow the story of Ruth, who tries to navigate life after the massive destruction. The world as we know it no longer exists. Money has zero significance, and the only currency is food. There are no laws, only anarchy and chaos. People who have survived only wish to have been dead. Hospitals can no longer perform their duties with no electricity or water, and government officials soon realize that they are now trapped underground, still trying to make sense of what's happening and gain control of the situation, as they would decide who would be fit to receive rations and who won't, according to people's ability to work. It has become survival of the fittest, back to the early time of human civilization. Ruth finally gives birth in an abandoned shed, all by herself in the harsh and cold climate, while a dog is barking at her. She tries her best to care for her daughter, but considering the situation she's in, we can't really blame Ruth for putting herself first. She is forced to trade her body for rats, one of the few forms of sustenance. You work hard, you get food to survive. We see an exodus take place where people are traveling from one city to another in hopes to find work and thus get food to survive. The conditions of living are extremely harsh, and it takes a toll on Ruth, who aged prematurely and developed cataracts. Children of that time speak broken English, only repeating basic words. This is primarily due to having no access to schools or education in general, but more so of how many adult survivors have turned mute, a trauma response to the horrific events they have lived. Ruth succumbs to her sickness and dies in her bed while her daughter Jane is watching her. No empathy there to be seen for her mother passing away. She just takes her possessions and leaves. The movie ends with a horrific scene of Jane giving birth to her child after she was by one of the teenagers that was with her. After labor, she takes a look at her child and gets completely disgusted and scared at the sight of it. And it cuts to black, no music, forcing the viewer to sit with the image of a future that is completely bleak and hopeless. The implication is clear. The radiation exposure across generations has taken its toll. The baby is likely deformed, and Jane's reaction says it all, which shows that the impact of nuclear warfare can linger for generations ahead. The movie makes the choice to end abruptly. There is no epilogue on what ultimately happens to the human race afterwards, because it probably won't be any different from what we have seen so far. No hope and no future. Threads is celebrated for its realism and straightforwardness. As viewers, we witness that a nuclear war would definitely mean the end of our civilization and the world as we know it. The film was nominated for 7 BAFTAs and won 4 awards out of the 7 nominations. To this day, superpowers still increase their arsenal of nuclear warheads, and the New START Treaty, the last remaining nuclear arms control agreement between the US and Russia, is set to expire on February 5th of 2026. The future is uncertain, but the tensions are growing. This is a classic case of life imitates art. Will we ever see a nuclear war in the near future? Probably not, because the consequences will be fatal. But it is very important to keep talking about this issue and make sure that everybody understands that a nuclear war means the world ending. Interestingly, the creators behind the Netflix series Adolescence, which I've covered before on the channel, are now working on a remake of Threads as a series. And honestly, it could be just as powerful, if not more. If you haven't seen Threads and didn't mind the spoilers here, I would really recommend you to give it a go. The film is available here on YouTube. Let me know what you think of it in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.